What if one of the most famous love stories ever told wasn't finished? Imagine a world where the fairy tale didn't end on the balcony, where Vivian and Edward's journey had another chapter to reveal. After 35 years, whispers are turning into shouts. Pretty Woman may finally be coming back. And this time, Netflix could be behind the magic. The story of Pretty Woman is almost like a legend now. Released in 1990, it wasn't just a romantic comedy, it was a cultural earthquake. People around the world fell in love with Vivian Ward, the quick-witted, big-hearted woman played by Julia Roberts, and Edward Lewis, the sharp but lonely businessman played by Richard Gere. Their story wasn't just about love. It was about transformation, about seeing people for who they really are, and about hope in the unlikeliest of places. The film became an instant hit, not only because of the actors, but because it touched something inside the audience. That unforgettable laugh from Vivian, the red dress and diamond necklace scene, and of course, the ending, Edward climbing up the fire escape, roses in hand, ready to rescue her, while she, in return, rescues him right back. Those images are burned into movie history. People still quote the lines, still play the soundtrack, still smile at the thought of rodeo drive shopping sprees and fairy tale romance in Beverly Hills. But here's the question that fans have been asking for more than 3 decades. What happened after? Did Vivian and Edward really get their happy ever after? Did the fairy tale last when the credits stopped rolling? The original movie never gave us an answer, and maybe that's why the story has stayed alive all these years. Audiences never stopped wondering and never stopped wanting more. Now, the rumor is spreading like wildfire. Netflix, the streaming giant that has revived so many beloved stories, might be bringing Pretty Woman back with a sequel titled Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance. And if this is true, it could mean that one of the most iconic romances in Hollywood history is about to step into a brand new spotlight. Fans who once watched the movie on VHS tapes or cable television could now see it reborn in 2025. Streaming into millions of homes around the world. But let's pause for a moment. This is not just another sequel. It's not just another cash grab. For many, Pretty Woman is sacred, a story that defined an era. If there really is a Pretty Woman 2, it has to answer the questions that have been locked away for 35 years. What became of Vivian and Edward? Did their love survive? Did they build a life together, or did the challenges of 2 very different worlds eventually pull them apart? And if they did part ways? Is this the second chance? The idea of this film returning now, in 2025, makes sense. Hollywood has been on a nostalgia wave, revisiting stories that audiences can't forget. But this one is different. This is not just about reliving old moments. It's about giving fans closure. Or maybe opening up a new chapter that feels just as magical as the first dot, so as whispers turn into reports, and reports turn into headlines. The question on everyone's mind is simple. Is Netflix really daring to bring Pretty Woman back to life? Asterisk, when Pretty Woman premiered in 1990, nobody could have predicted just how big it would become. It wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. The film, made on a relatively modest budget, exploded at the box office, earning over $460 million worldwide. But the numbers only tell part of the story. The real magic of Pretty Woman was in the way it captured hearts, reshaped an entire genre, and turned Julia Roberts into one of the most beloved stars of all time. Audiences weren't just watching a love story. They were watching the birth of a new kind of Cinderella tale, one that wasn't about glass slippers or castles, but about shopping malls, penthouse suites, and the messy, complicated nature of real human connection. Vivian wasn't a damsel in distress. She was funny, sharp, resilient, and unafraid to stand her ground. Edward wasn't a prince, but a flawed, lonely man searching for meaning beyond money and power. Together, they created one of cinema's most enduring couples. The film redefined what a romantic comedy could be. Before Pretty Woman, rom-coms were often lighthearted, predictable, and filled with cliches. But here was a story that mixed romance with class commentary, glamour with grit, and fantasy with reality. Hollywood took notice. Soon, studios were racing to replicate the formula, but few could ever capture the same magic doc, and then there was Julia Roberts. At just 22 years old, she became a global icon overnight. Her performance was radiant, charming, and endlessly human. The role earned her an Academy Award nomination and cemented her as America's sweetheart for the next 2 decades. Richard Gere, already known as a star, saw his career skyrocket as Edward, the suave but vulnerable businessman. Their chemistry was electric, the kind that can't be manufactured, the kind that becomes timeless. The cultural impact didn't stop with the box office. The soundtrack went multi-platinum, with Roy Orbison's "Oh, Pretty Woman" becoming an anthem all over again. Fashion from the film influenced trends for years, from Vivian's red gown to her thigh-high boots. Lines from the movie, "Big mistake, huge," became catchphrases that are still quoted today. But more than the glamour, it was the film's message that stuck. It told viewers that love can be found in unexpected places, that people deserve second chances, and that sometimes fairy tales can exist in the real world, even if just for 2 hours on a movie screen. For many, Pretty Woman wasn't just entertainment. It was a symbol of hope, laughter, and the possibility of transformation. And yet, even with all its success, there was always something left unresolved. The movie ended on the balcony with Edward overcoming his fear of heights and Vivian stepping into a new life. But that's where it stopped. We never saw what happened the day after, the year after, or the decade after. Did the billionaire and the woman from Hollywood Boulevard actually make it work? Or did their worlds eventually clash in ways love couldn't overcome? That silence left fans hungry, imagining their own sequels in their heads. Over the years, whispers of a continuation popped up again and again. Scripts were rumored, spin-offs were discussed, but nothing ever truly materialized. Hollywood seemed too afraid to touch it, maybe because Pretty Woman felt untouchable. Maybe because no one wanted to break the magic. But as time passed, the demand never went away. Every new romantic comedy seemed to remind people of the film that started it all. And every new love story was inevitably compared to Vivian and Edward's. That's why the possibility of a sequel now, in 2025, feels so powerful. This isn't just about nostalgia. It's about reconnecting with a cultural moment that defined an era. It's about revisiting characters who left an imprint on millions of lives. And it's about exploring themes that still matter today: class divides, second chances, and the complicated search for happiness in a changing world. For Netflix, this isn't just another film project. It's an opportunity to bring one of cinema's most beloved stories to a new generation while honoring the legacy that made the first film immortal. It's about uniting longtime fans who grew up with the VHS tapes and new viewers who might be watching Vivian and Edward's story for the very first time on a streaming platform. And so, as the rumors swirl and the excitement builds, the legacy of Pretty Woman becomes more than history. It becomes the foundation for something bigger, something that could redefine romantic storytelling once again. The balcony scene may have ended in 1990, but maybe, just maybe, that was never the ending at all. Asterisk, the whispers started quietly. A tweet here, a leaked casting notice there, a cryptic Instagram post that fans swore meant more than it seemed. But by early 2025, those whispers turned into headlines. Netflix might actually be bringing Pretty Woman back. Suddenly, what once felt like a fantasy became the hottest rumor in Hollywood. So, what's fueling all this excitement? For starters, Netflix has been on a streak of reviving classics. From reboots of sitcoms to sequels of long-forgotten franchises, the streaming giant has proven it isn't afraid to touch sacred ground. If anyone has the money, power, and audience to resurrect Vivian and Edward's love story, it's Netflix. But this project isn't like any other. This isn't just another romantic comedy. This is Pretty Woman, and that means every move, every decision, every rumor is dissected by fans who have loved the original for decades. The first spark came from a supposed internal project listing spotted online, mentioning a film with the working title Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance. It didn't take long for fans to connect the dots. Soon, industry insiders began to suggest that Netflix was indeed in talks to bring back Julia Roberts and Richard Gere for one final chapter. For many, this sounded too good to be true, but the idea spread like wildfire, and then came the speculation. What would a sequel even look like in 2025? Could Julia Roberts, now in her 50s, return as Vivian, the woman who once took the world by storm with her confidence and charm? Could Richard Gere, in his 70s, step back into the polished shoes of Edward Lewis, the businessman who risked everything for love? Fans began to imagine the possibilities, filling social media with theories, artwork, and even fan-written scripts. Some believe the sequel would show Vivian and Edward years later, happily married but facing the challenges of family, aging, and the modern world. Others think the story might take a different path, that perhaps Vivian and Edward didn't last, and now, after decades apart, fate brings them back together for one final chance at love. There are even wild theories that the story could center around Vivian's daughter, a new character who inherits her mother's spirit and charm, with Julia Roberts appearing in a mentor role. Of course, not everyone is convinced. Hollywood history is filled with sequels that never lived up to the originals. Fans worry that touching Pretty Woman could ruin its legacy, turning a timeless classic into just another cash grab. But others argue that if done with care, this could be something special, a story not just about young love, but about what it means to love again when life has already given you one fairy tale dot. And then there's the question of style. Will Netflix go for a glossy, glamorous approach, bringing back the Rodeo Drive sparkle and big ballads of the original? Or will they choose something more grounded, more realistic, in line with modern rom-coms that focus on vulnerability and second chances? Either way, one thing is clear. If this film is real, it will have to balance nostalgia with reinvention. Even the cast rumors add fuel to the fire. Alongside Roberts and Gere, names of younger stars are being tossed around: Florence Pugh, Zendaya, Timothée Chalamet, actors who could embody a new generation and bridge the gap between past and present. Could it be a story of two worlds again, the old and the new, the seasoned and the youthful? Fans can't stop speculating, but perhaps the most intriguing detail is the rumored title itself. Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance. The words suggest more than just a continuation. They hint at redemption, at love rediscovered, at time lost and regained. They imply that this isn't just a reunion, it's a reckoning, a story about what happens when the fairy tale isn't perfect, but still worth fighting for. Of course, Netflix has yet to confirm anything. No official announcements, no trailers, no press releases, and maybe that's why the excitement is so strong. The mystery is half the thrill. Fans are hanging on to every rumor, waiting for that one headline that finally makes it official. Until then, the buzz keeps growing, like a love story waiting to be told, because deep down, whether they admit it or not, millions of people want to see Vivian and Edward again. They want to know if love really can last 35 years. They want to believe that fairy tales don't end with a kiss on a balcony. They evolve, they struggle, they grow. And maybe, just maybe, Netflix is about to give the world the second chance it's been waiting for, asterisk. So here we are, standing at the edge of something that could either be the most exciting romantic revival of the decade, or the riskiest. Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance is more than just a rumor at this point. It's a promise that fans can't stop hoping will come true. But the bigger question is, should it? For 35 years, the original Pretty Woman has lived untouched in the hearts of millions. It's a story that generations have passed down, a film people watch on rainy nights when they need to believe in love again, or when they want to relive the feeling of being swept away by something magical. Bringing it back now could either new jewel to the crown, or risk dulling the shine of something already perfect. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Pretty Woman was never supposed to end on a balcony. Maybe the story was always waiting for this moment, to grow, to evolve, to remind us that love doesn't freeze in time. It ages with us. It changes. It fights to survive in a world that never stops moving. What if the very risk of making a sequel is the proof that Vivian and Edward's love is still alive, because love, like cinema, is meant to keep moving forward? Imagine it, Vivian Ward no longer the wide-eyed dreamer, but a woman who has lived, who has struggled, who has learned that happily ever afters require work. Edward Lewis, no longer the untouchable billionaire, but a man who has faced the weight of time, mistakes, and regrets. A story not about rescuing each other from lonely lives, but about rediscovering each other after the storms of life. A second chance not only for them, but for us, the audience that never stopped believing, and this isn't just about nostalgia. This is about relevance. The world of 2025 is not the world of 1990. The conversations around power, class, and love have all changed. If Pretty Woman 2 really happens, it has the opportunity to speak to a new generation, to say something meaningful about love in the age of social media, wealth gaps, and reinvention. It can still be glamorous, still be fun, still be filled with laughter and charm, but it can also be wiser, braver, and bolder than ever before. But of course, none of this is guaranteed. Right now, all we have are whispers, speculation, and the hope that Netflix will step forward with the truth. Until then, the film exists only in our imagination. And maybe that's what makes this moment so powerful, the waiting, the wondering, the dreaming. Because in that space, anything is possible, and so we ask you, the audience, do you want it? Do you want to see Julia Roberts walk Rodeo Drive one more time? Do you want to see Richard Gere climb that fire escape again, older but still willing to risk everything for love? Do you want to discover if Vivian and Edward's story has another chapter, or would you rather the fairy tale remain untouched, frozen in 1990, as perfect as it always was? Your voice matters. The fans built this legend, and the fans will decide its future. If Netflix is listening, and you know they are, the demand for Pretty Woman 2 will only grow louder with every conversation, every post, every dream of what could be. The decision may lie in Hollywood's hands, but the heartbeat belongs to you. So, as we close this chapter of speculation and step into a year filled with anticipation, one truth remains: love stories never really end. They echo, they linger, they wait for us to return. Maybe in 2025, we'll finally get that return. Maybe we'll see Vivian smile again. Maybe we'll hear Edward's voice calling out from a limousine window. Maybe the fairy tale will continue, not because it has to, but because it always deserved to. Until then, we wait. We hope and we believe. Because some stories are too beautiful to stay silent forever,